So thank you for being here. Uh, Questioning questions. What is it all about? What can it be about? You've noticed that good teachers ask a lot of questions in the class. And that's the topic. I mean, why are we asking questions? And what is the effect? And myself, I've been struggling with why students are not engaged in class. Their minds wander. And now with Facebook and everything, they're elsewhere, totally. So this has been my passion to find out. So the title today is Should we use questions to help launch the building of neuron clusters? So I use neuron clusters loosely because we really don't know how these things work in our brain. So basically, role of questions as we use them now, and questions and questioning play a significant role in teaching and learning. And nowadays, what's been happening is this Socratic learning method is also being applied to flipped classrooms where they get the students to ask questions. So it's not just the teacher, the student is also now involved. Yet, results are not always consistent, particularly in STEM education. And in my own university, we have a foundation maths course, and 1,500 students avoided taking the fundamental maths course till their final semester at the university. But surprisingly, the syllabus is the same as they do in school and college, but they are afraid of maths. They just don't want to know. So we are ending up in this problem, particularly in engineering and maths education. On the other hand, we have neuroscience, which tells us that questions captivate neurons. I mean, when a question is asked, apparently all 86 billion neurons try and look for the answer, and they engage the entire brain. So if we try and link these things, and that's basically what I'm trying to do. So in parallel, we have the theory of constructivism, a very popular theory, which is knowledge construction in the brain, but on top of existing knowledge. So constructivism essentially says that there is some knowledge existing. So we're not building on a blank slate. So we build on something that exists. So that's where the challenge comes in. Where does this something exist? And how do we know that we are building in the right place? So Batchtold in 2013 asked a methodological question, and this was, what do students construct according to constructivism in science education? What is it they actually construct? So at the end of the paper, he summarizes, ideally, each new proposal in science education should explicitly take into account all these construction processes and factors that support them. At the very least, it should clearly specify which construction process and which of these factors it's dealing with, rather than speaking indistinctly of knowledge construction. So basically what is he saying? He's saying that what is the data? What is the exact knowledge that has to be constructed? We should go deeper and look at the process that is involved in building knowledge. So these are the main keywords: what and construction process and factors and knowledge construction. So putting this all together, so how can this data processing problem be approached? Because he's basically talking about what data has to be constructed in the brain. So in an attempt to link constructivism and questions, I put together some additional methodological questions. And these are, why should a question be asked? And what type of question? So how should the question be asked? And when should the question be asked? So these are just following on from batch told. I've just added the 5 WH questions. Where would the subsequent new knowledge be constructed? And finally, who should be asking the questions? So in an attempt to answer these questions, I went through all the literature, but the literature doesn't allow us to answer all these questions, the existing literature. So I used an additional source for the literature review. And this source is from the story of Moses in the scripture. Okay? So, but this is a particular, in one particular scripture, Moses is trained to go to Pharaoh. And he has a rod which he is taught that it can become a snake. But what is interesting is how the training starts. It starts with a question. And what is in that in your thy right hand, O Moses? Obviously, Moses knows what is there. And if God is addressing him, he of course knows what's in Moses' hand. So why does he ask a question? And then, this is most interesting. Moses' reply. He doesn't just say that it is my rod. He adds, on it I lean, this is an application. With it I beat down fodder for my flocks. And in it I find other uses. So how is Moses able to answer all the particular applications of the rod? Okay? So this is what I try to put together. And then, experiential learning, throw it, O Moses. Okay? So it's confirmed that this is a rod and all the applications are there, and now it's a new application of the rod. So where would it sit in the brain, the new application? So he threw it, and behold, it was a snake active in motion. And he becomes afraid. That means all the things to do with the snake, he now understands because he's afraid. Okay? So all these things, how they're organized in the brain, is something I'm trying to put together. But this particular passage is from the Quran, chapter 20. These are the verses, translation actually. So if we analyze these verses from a data point of view, can we get answers to the additional questions that we have? So here, I've put down a possible data model from the story of Moses. So see, this, if we can call this a cluster, it has the applications with it. And this cluster recognizes the rod. Okay? So what happens when Moses is asked the question and he replies? So where's the question? And what is that in thy right hand, O Moses? Now to answer this question, he must access this cluster, and he reports all these uses. Okay. Now it's quite similar to how we use Google. If we don't know where the website is, if we don't have the address, we ask a query question, and then Google lists what we find in the website, and we confirm that this is the website, and then we can add new information to the website. It's quite similar. So this is the cluster that recognizes the rod with all its uses. And somewhere we have the cluster of the attributes of snakes. So once that question is asked and he responds, then he's asked to throw the rod and it becomes a snake. So this is a new experience which adds on to all the applications. And this rod becomes a snake. So connecting with the neuron cluster that contains the properties of snakes, the cluster that recognizes snakes. So this is just the model that I've tried to visualize what's going on. And this question is the basic question that we are trying to address. The rest of these, all our educational processes manage this. But the first question, when it leads us to the area in the brain on the topic that we are trying to teach, if we're at the area, then we can keep on adding whatever we want. So how should the brain be addressed for teaching? So what I did, I've put together this theoretical frame. How is the brain and questions connected? From science, review of scientific theories, neuroscience findings and laws, etc., like the theory of constructivism. And then from the scripture, instances of teaching, questions on the nature of the brain and instances of teaching. And then we have action research, applied research. Do query questions help access existing knowledge and thereby support constructivism? Findings from action research. So this is basically the frame that I used to create the model. And with it, one of the major concerns is teachers who deal with these questions in class. So I wanted to find out how teachers actually use questions in class. So this is the response. They use launching questions, presenting interesting stories, etc., connecting with real life, ice-breaking, starting from a previous lesson, addressing the topic directly. So this was during registration. I taught online. This was during the COVID period. So batches from Bangladesh, from Nepal, from Malaysia. So total of 394 teachers. So this was the response. So 36.5 use launching questions in class, but it's mainly recall of material, of previous class material. But 3.9% address the topic directly. Intuitively, they use hook questions. So there are many teachers who realize that they have to engage the students immediately when they start the class. So the research methodology, a lesson plan was developed using 12 query questions. And we trained a total of 394 teachers who registered online during the COVID period. And the topic was how to design query questions using the model that we just saw. And it was tertiary level teachers from Bangladesh, Nepal, and Malaysia. So nature of questions asked at the end of the class were evaluated. So how do we evaluate whether the teachers have understood? Okay, very difficult. So what we did, we decided to look at the questions that they ask at the end of the class, whether they wish to use this theory, whether they're interested. Okay, so this was analysis of the knowledge transferability. So 33.7% asked application questions at the end. 44 asked some meta questions about how to apply it, what would happen, etc. And some asked questions on similar topic, and some, 5.8% didn't understand what was going on at all. So participants' questions show a motivation. This was the result to apply the learning to their own classes. 22% asked parting questions out of the 394, and this was analyzed. Of these, 51% asked metacognition questions, 33% application questions. 84%, therefore, showed total of this, showed a motivation to transfer knowledge to their own classes. So that's it, basically. The conclusion, the model provides a schema for this should be constructivist pedagogy. Basically, it provides a why and a how behind the hook that teachers use to engage students and help them learn. This would help teachers understand how to design query questions to launch a topic. So it would be very encouraging if we try trials for STEM courses need to be done, whether the model can contribute to logical thinking. That's it. Thank you.
Your timing was absolutely perfect. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. We've got time for some questions. Yes, go ahead.
I love that. Thank you so much. I really enjoyed that. And I love the story you told. But my question relates to why a snake?
Sorry?
Why the metaphor of snake for new knowledge, new questions? Why something threatening? Could it have been another metaphor of misunderstood?
Oh, in the story itself?
Yeah, so when you're looking at
Because,
new questions after the
yes,
application.
it was the age of magic. The court of Pharaoh, they had lots of magicians. So Moses was also taught magic, but it was real because Moses' snake actually ate up all the other snakes. So that's how the story comes.
Yeah, I'm just wondering if we can have a less threatening
metaphor
for the generation of new knowledge was my thinking. But
Right.
I really did love that bit of concept.
Thank you.
Question.
I really enjoy your story, so fantastic. I was listening to you, putting myself on the position of a student. That is not easy. But one thing that came to me straight away is when students ask questions, a lot of them will fear. And I do know a bit of neuroscience. I know that fear will trigger amygdala and stops the thinking process.
Right. Absolutely.
So automatically we jeopardize the learning process. So shall we be actually looking at environments where we avoid the fear?
Right. So obviously it has to be a question that can be easily answered. And as a teacher, I have to find out what that is. But in Bangladesh particularly, we have a culture that students are very shy. They lack self-esteem and they're very shy. And there's also this gender problem. That what will the girls think, the boys think when we ask questions. But what we do, what I particularly do, and because they are shy, I just pair them up. So I just discuss and then give me the answer. So when they start talking to each other, believe me, it takes about a minute and a half before they open up. But once they open up, the whole room is full of noise. Please.
Yeah. And then we'll go there and I'll phrase that's okay.
No, I just thought it was brilliant taking the inspiration from the
Sorry?
Bible. I thought it was brilliant taking inspiration from the Bible. You just wouldn't think
Yeah.
it's sort of there
Yeah.
for to help this
Right.
conundrum. And I think the snake. I mean, obviously it's in the Bible. There are lots of snakes, so
Yeah.
there is that sort of threatening element. But presumably you could then take that and create a new story of your own that has something that maybe some people wouldn't find.
Right.
I find the snake fascinating, but I can see that some people
I've lived with one.
yeah, and presumably you can take that, having been inspired by that, you could create your own story, to as well to illustrate.
Right.
We'll go to the final question for this.
Thank you. Yes, no, this is a very important way to think about classes and trying to take a good time. I wonder if you could say a few things about the flip side of the coin, which is the response to the question. So building the questions, there's an expectation of some type of response, but the students have different data clusters that they're building on. Not all the students are the same. And even in your example, there's a follow-up. It's not a question, it's an action to do something. And so that is part of the whole process. But,
Absolutely.
So how does
The question just takes you there. But the rest, all our usual stuff that we do, all active learning stuff, everything is applicable. All this does is takes us to the right place, that's it. Because Pascal's question, what do we construct? But I simply add, where do we construct? And how do we find it? Because if you imagine buildings being constructed, so you are required to add a floor to a building. So the first thing is you need to find which building it is.
Yeah.
And then you can add.
I'm wondering about the diversity within the classroom itself. So the responses to the questions, the way the students respond is
Right.
quite
So what I
diverse.
do, I use a software called it's a web software, Mentimeter, and I get them to pair up, and everybody responds. So we look at all the responses, and then design the next step.
I'm afraid we have to move on. And
Yes.
a presentation about questions created so many questions. So you'll have the opportunity, I'm sure, to chat
Yeah.
afterwards. But thank you very much indeed. Really interesting.